It's my sincere pleasure this evening to have the opportunity to introduce to you our guest speaker for the night, Jessie Bauer. Jessie has been a member of Langhouse for 3 years. She is an accomplished youth speaker that you'll all get to see tonight for yourselves. She is a mental health advocate. She is a true inspiration to so many, a joy to have at Langhouse with us, and gives to so much of herself to so many others. We're so lucky to know her. Please join me in welcoming Jessie Bauer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate a beautiful place called Langhouse. My story starts like this. I was 25 years old, living on my own, working for Bell Alliant, and I had been promoted. It was a time in my life I would refer to as bliss. I had truly thought I found my sweet spot in all areas, and although I wasn't naive to think I was safe from the unfortunate events of life, I never thought mental illness would affect me, especially with such force and destruction. For me, it started slow. I first experienced the awful feeling of anxiety. I would go to work and go to the bathroom and stand in the stalls just trying to escape the overwhelming chaos storming inside of me. I barely slept and I hardly ate. Then depression crept in, and I would go home and lie in bed for hours, feeling like a failure. I finally knew something was very wrong when I started walking to work, wishing, praying even, that a car would come across the road and hit me. I was hopeless. In my case, I guess you could say it was bittersweet, as my dad had been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder a few years prior. So I decided to go home and come clean. The funny thing with mental illness, at least in my life, was that most people hid it. It is a nasty little secret masked in smiles and facade, and was something that was simply swept under the rug. I now know that mental illness was running rampant in the lives of my family and friends, and it makes me sad to know that people suffered years alone in darkness, and that a generation of us to come walked blindly into something that should have never been hidden. Because of my dad's situation, we knew what to do. So off I went to the family doctor for some medication and a waiting game. At first there was no relief, but then to my surprise, the clouds cleared and I felt alive again. There was only one catch. I started feeling really, really good. Shortly after this, my family made a brave and quick-thinking decision to take me to the hospital during my first full-blown manic episode. I was irrational, completely out of touch, and on a very, very reckless road. I was admitted to the hospital on the psychiatric ward and diagnosed with bipolar mood disorder. I certainly don't have time for all the details, and I do believe I could write a book about it, but I will tell you this: the road ahead was hell. I was hospitalized 3 times in 4 months, and my feeling was like many others I have met, locked away and lost. Later released from the hospital and down from my high, I slipped into a state of depression. Mental illness has many faces and labels, and in addition to the highs and lows of my mood disorder, I experienced intrusive thoughts, obsessive compulsiveness, and paranoia. When you turn the stove off and then you check it over and over again to make sure it's off, or when you go to make candy apples for the kids in your neighborhood, just like every other Halloween, but this time think or wonder if someone might have put razor blades in the apples, you do know something's wrong. But who in your life could possibly understand? And what kind of monster would they think you've become? As I attempt to show you just how amazing Langhouse is, you'll probably wonder how I found it. And thank God I did. Just before my first hospitalization, in a pre-manic frenzy, I had remembered that my mother told me about Langhouse, and I decided I wanted to be a volunteer there. It turned out that Langhouse was just down the street, and all of those days I walked to work with my death wish, I had walked right past their door. That day I walked in to be a volunteer. It didn't take them long to see that I was a very sick young woman, and they kindly gave me the form to become a member. All of the other members were encouraging me to join them, but in my frenzy and delusion, I just didn't understand what it all meant. Over the following 4 months, I lost a lot of myself, in and out of the hospital. But I clung to my family and friends, and I held on to the form to become a member. A few months later, I went back to Langhouse to fill out the forms, and all of the members were talking about the excitement of the masquerade ball. It is by far the highlight of the year for us Langsters, all dressed to the nines and feeling so much love and support. I believe I had missed the deadline to sign up, and to my surprise, I ended up in the hospital for the third and last time. I specifically recall throwing one of my shoes into the hamper of my hospital room to be taken away, believing that a prince was going to bring it back to me and take me to the Langhouse ball. True story. Looking back, I can see now it just wasn't my time, and I never got my shoe back. Finally, I made my way back to Langhouse for good. For me, it was a safe place. I had moved in with my parents for my recovery, and sitting in their basement with no driver's license or anyone to relate to, well, you can imagine the great comfort I found at Langhouse. It was a place where I could be amongst people who understood the trauma and the pain I was facing. At that point, my anxiety still ran rampant, and I was often experiencing side effects from the new medications I was put on. But while I was at Langhouse, I felt protected. I slowly got more confidence, and with the help of many, was exposed to society again. We cooked meals together, we did art, we went camping and sailing, and so much more. And over time, I took a great interest in the stories of others, and I was no longer angry or afraid of mental illness, but fascinated. I could also see that not everyone had the same supports. Mental illness has a cruel way of tearing relationships apart. I soon realized Langhouse, to some, was the only real example of a family present in their lives. In addition, the more we talked about the pain we had, I realized I wasn't the only one who wished to not be alive in moments of desperation. There were people who had numbed themselves with self-medication, cut themselves, or suffered other ongoing battles. We are such a diverse group of young people, but we all have something in common. We found a place that accepts us and encourages us to face that which challenges us. I think of Langhouse as a beacon of hope. They say, come on in, come as you are. For some of us, they take off the Band-Aid that the hospital put on and truly start the healing process. They remove the shame that society led us to believe we had to own. One of my favorite things about Langhouse is that they encourage and understand recovery comes in many forms. Some use the paint or the sewing machine or the button maker as an outlet. Others spend time in the kitchen cooking or sharing war stories over many, many cups of coffee. It really doesn't matter if you stand in front of a room full of people and tell your story, or if it's you who goes to Writer's Circle and doesn't want to share the poem they wrote. There is no judgment on what Langhouse is to you, and that's why it can be something different for each of us. My efforts to paint you a picture of Langhouse could go on forever, if you could just remember a couple things. Langhouse saves lives. Just as a firefighter runs into a burning building to rescue someone, we have been rescued. And remember that we not only recover, we push through burden, stigma, and pain as we rediscover ourselves, and that because of Langhouse, the load to carry is lighter, and the journey has more promise and hope. As for me, I now realize that living on my own at 25 wasn't my sweet spot. Today, as you can see, I'm part of something bigger than myself. I'm part of a time of change and wellness for myself and for others. Standing here tonight brings a sense of joy and purpose like no other. Thank you so much for this time together, and have a wonderful evening as we celebrate and empower youth with mental illness that are thriving at a place called Lang House.
Jesse Bauer. Jesse, I think they liked you. I mean, I'm pretty sure. Did you? Yeah, what a speech. Thank you, Jesse.